Well, interestingly, he went the week after the Liberation Day tariff announcement by Donald Trump, which, from Andrew Hauser's experience on that trip, shocked everyone in China in the magnitude of tariffs announced. They'd been expecting something like maybe 40 or 50 or 60% tariffs, but anything above 60% was seen as an effective embargo on Chinese exports to the US. So they were caught off guard, but interestingly, the assessment of the Chinese economy at the time was that it had been turning a corner since September 2024, when the Politburo in China had intervened with extra stimulus, which was seen to be effective, and it also reached a kind of resolution with the private business sector in China, freeing up more private investment. And of course, there was the boost to confidence from the DeepSeek AI announcements that the Chinese tech sector was really starting to take off.
So what was the view about how Trump's tariffs would affect Australia's biggest trading partner?
Yes, well, you know, it was a shock, the size of them, but people weren't particularly worried about the economic effect on China, strangely enough. And there's a graph in Andrew Hauser's presentation that perhaps illustrates why. It shows the trade dependence between the US and China, and basically the quartile of trade dependence where China's dependent on the US is almost blank. The quarter where the US is totally dependent on China is very full, and the quarters where the US is more dependent on China than it is on the US are also quite full. So when you look at the trading relationship, it is, as Donald Trump said, very lopsided, and that's why the Chinese weren't particularly worried. There was a rough consensus that the tariffs on Liberation Day might wipe up to 2% from Chinese GDP. But that was before any stimulus response, and we have seen a stimulus response since from the Chinese government. And also, of course, since then there has been a deal to wind those tariffs back, at least temporarily, to 30%. And so that will reduce the growth impact on China.
So what's the RBA's assessment on how this will affect Australia? Of course, China is our major trading partner.
Yeah, so the RBA's current assessment of the Chinese economy is that it will grow by about 4.8% this year and 4.4% next year. That kind of assumes that the current 30% level of tariffs on Chinese exports to the US remain in place, or something in that range, and that the Chinese government continues to support its economy. Now, China's government's targeting 5% growth, so 4.8% wouldn't be too bad. Now, interestingly though, Michele Bullock, the RBA governor, is travelling to China next week. So 2 visits in the space of a couple of months from the RBA's 2 most senior officials show you just how critical they think the Chinese economy is to Australia, and how much they want to understand on the ground what the economic situation is in China.
Absolutely. Michael Janda, thank you.
Thanks, Alicia.